Good evening, guys. Welcome to the 330 Sports Show. Today is Thursday, August 13th, 2026. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our guest before I bring him on. He is a graduate of Ohio University. He started at the Sporting News as a fantasy football writer in 2007, has covered the college football playoffs. He has covered the NBA Finals. He has covered the World Series, all for Sports Nation. He enjoys storytelling, awesomely bad 80s movie, which is right up my alley. And he is or was the president, the 2025 president of the Football Writers Association of America. Let's bring on Bill Bender. Bill, how you doing tonight?
Hey, Justin, man. Yeah, thank you for the long intro there. And we could probably spend the entire half hour talking 80s movies, but I definitely know you, grad. Lived in Ohio most of my life. I had a 7-year stay in Charlotte with Sporting News. Our offices are down there, but excited to finally catch up with you. This should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, it's quite an impressive bio. So let's start there. So you've covered, football, basketball, college football, and all sorts of events. What's your favorite thing you've ever covered?
I mean, it's going to be right up your alley. So I was actually thinking about this the other night with all these years I've been at Sporting News and was kind of in my head, okay, what's the best event I've ever covered? And it's funny, all these years of college football, and I've been fortunate to be at some really good games over the years, but it will always be 2016 World Series Game 7. And I was the kind of the third string reporter for us that night, but in the area. So I kind of got to write what I wanted. Unfortunately, it ended in the Cubs clubhouse. But
Sure.
the singular sports moment I think I'll ever remember is Rajai Davis's homer. And I'm not a big Guardians fan or anything like that. My wife is. But that moment was unbelievable. And it's one that I still remember and recall, and I thought Cleveland was going to win, but it didn't happen. It's a bad memory in some ways, but it's got to be a good memory because that was one of
Oh
the
yeah.
best sporting events of all time.
No doubt, no doubt. That stadium had to be electric. I mean, I was at home watching it, but you could almost feel it from wherever you were watching it at. That's fantastic. Um, is there something on your bucket list you haven't covered that you'd like to eventually get to?
Super Bowl, probably. I've
Okay.
done the finals for us. Well, again, when you do this job long enough and you live in Ohio, you're blessed to cover some cool stuff. Like
Yeah.
the finals matchups between the Warriors and Cavs were memorable. Had a chance to do the Kentucky Derby. Been to a playoff game or two in the NFL, but never done a Super Bowl. And that's one that I'd like to do at some point. I don't know if I would want to do the media day before because there's so many people there.
Sure.
But just to live out that experience, it would be a lot of fun to do someday. But again, Sporting News has put me at multiple national title games, NBA Finals. The NFL playoff game that sticks out, I know you probably remember this one. There was a really crazy one between the Bengals and the Steelers about 10 years ago. And
Yeah.
ended with Antonio Brown and Vontez and got crazy. That was a good one, too.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. So you've had the opportunity to cover some great events over the course of your time. So you're an Ohio Bobcat, 2002 grad, if I'm not mistaken. You've spent much of your years covering not just Ohio State, but the Big Ten, and you live in Ohio. So do you think the living in Ohio might shape the way you cover the Buckeyes or Big Ten in general, as opposed to being, you're a national guy, but you live right here in the heart of it?
Well, I've always said, one of the reasons I was able to move back from Charlotte back to Ohio with my job, it was the year after Ohio State won the national championship in 2014. Kind of, I was helping with college football then, but at the time I was like, well, it makes sense for me to move back up there. And it's not just for me, it's good for business when Ohio State's good, when Michigan's good, when Notre Dame's good. Penn State, even Nebraska, if they ever got their act together again. So,
Right.
you get to cover that. Sometimes when you live in the bubble of Central Ohio,
Hmm.
you get caught up in some things, but not from a fandom perspective. I would say more from a, just you feel some of the momentum. And it's easy to forget that Ohio State is among the all-time blue bloods here. So like the standards in a Columbus, Ohio, or a Tuscaloosa, Alabama, are far different than they are in most of the places. That's what I've found. Those two places in particular, it's never acceptable to lose in any given week, it seems like. But
Sure.
they're excellent programs, excellent people around both, and I enjoy covering the Big Ten and the SEC and wherever I can find a good story.
Absolutely, absolutely, and you've written a ton of great ones. Let's talk about some of those Big Ten teams here a little bit. You basically wrote, and I don't want to misquote you, but basically the Big Ten essentially ruling the land lately. Michigan, Ohio State, Indiana winning one of the non-traditional blue bloods. Indiana, I believe, had the worst record in college football history until 2 years ago, winning the most recent national championship. Is the Big Ten, in your opinion, kind of like the king of college football? Have they overtaken the SEC in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, but it's a weird argument in some ways. So when I was living in Charlotte, it touches SEC country in South Carolina, and this was the time in the BCS era where the SEC ruled college football. It really started ironically, when Florida beat Ohio State in that BCS championship game, and it really didn't stop from there. LSU beats Ohio State. I used to call them New Year's Day massacres when the Big Ten would just get slaughtered by the SEC and on some of these games. But if you look at the last 3 years, there's a couple things that stand out, Justin. You go, the SEC is 12-11 head-to-head against the Big Ten the last 3 seasons, which is a little bit odd, but we don't measure on non-con or strength of schedule. We measure on the playoff games, and the Big Ten's been able to win those. Ohio State nuked Tennessee 2 years ago. Michigan beats Alabama in a Rose Bowl. Indiana, I don't even know what you call what they did to Alabama last year. It was shocking. So when you're winning on those stages, I think it means a little bit more. I mean, Ohio State beat Texas too. That's an easy one to forget about. That was in a lot of ways, to me, that was the national championship game that year. No disrespect to Notre Dame. I just think they were a couple years away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very, very true. And, the northern teams have sort of, I don't know if it's NIL or the change of the college football landscape. They've really taken a step seemingly ever since NIL has been put into place. We can touch on the NIL stuff in a little bit, but I want to know, in your opinion, because there's been a ton of, you've seen the BCS era, you've seen the 4-team playoff era. We're in the 12-team era. There's talk about 24. There's talk about 16 from some. In your mind and your opinion, and you've probably heard lots of different opinions from coaches, from players, from supporters. What is the perfect number of teams in your mind for the college football playoff going forward?
Oh, that's a tough question. Just because, well, I mean, I don't know if we're allowed to share our age. So I'm 47.
Yeah,
okay?
yeah.
I'm 47 and old enough to remember, trying to explain to a 15-year-old son that, hey, they used to just kind of pick a champion at the end of the year with the voters, and the coaches picked one too, and sometimes there were two. And I like the BCS era in a lot of ways. I like the 4-team era. I think as we get into expansion, as you know, probably a baseball fan that sounds like that, we're never going to contract it. So if we were to expand it, 16s is kind of like the number I hope they stop there, even though that's the number not talked about, because at that point you'd have 4 rounds. Maybe you can sneak the first 2 rounds on campus. I know as somebody that was there for that Ohio State-Tennessee game, it was one of the coolest environments because it was a playoff game. There was a little bit of a different environment around that game for a lot of reasons, but it was awesome. And I think the more of that would be good. I think 24 is too many. 12's fine. 16 would be fine. I wrote a column about 20 this week that I was like, I get it, but I still wouldn't love it. 24 is too many because then you're getting four lost teams in there, and I'm not sure I want to see that.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. The only, this is just my argument for 24, and I'm not arguing for it. I actually like 12. I think 12 is perfect. But the only argument I heard positively for 24 that someone made, I believe it was Douglas Maurice, said you could eliminate sort of the conference championship games and sort of have some play-ins that would take the place in that opening round. And that kind of sold me a little bit. I don't love it still, but I think 12 is the perfect number. But we all know, I think money is probably going to drive this thing and drive that number up, I believe.
Well, Doug does an outstanding job. And I think so. That's what I was kind of getting at with the 20 team. I was looking at it this week, and you had I sketched it out what it would have looked like last year. And your playing games would have been something like Texas versus Duke or Virginia, whoever won the ACC. You would have had Tulane versus Vandy. You would have had Michigan versus Utah. And that's like that was an interesting matchup in my head. I was like, wonder if that would have changed some things. But USC Arizona, and I was doing that in my head. I said, you know what? I would watch that more than I would watch the conference championships, because the hard part for me with the conference championships right now is like take it last year, for example, Indiana, Ohio State, amazing matchup, amazing game. It's 1 versus 2. It's all those things. But in the back of my head watching that game, I said, yeah, it's for a trophy, but it's for seeding. I was probably watching the ACC game a little bit harder because that was determining a playoff spot. That was really determining multiple playoff spots in some ways. And kind of the same way I feel about the SEC title game, which I know is such a big piece of that conference's identity. At the same time, I kind of had a feeling Georgia and Alabama were going to get in anyway.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's definitely something I know the SEC wants to hold on to, but it kind of is what it is. And, we will see what the conference commissioners determine and all that going forward. Bill, you've covered college football for quite a while, but we've talked about the playoff changes. You've seen a lot of other changes. I mentioned NIL earlier, the transfer portal, all sorts of different things. Now we have 5 for 5. What is one thing, in an ideal world, if you could pick it, one or two things, if you could pick, that you would change about college football, maybe for the better?
Well, the calendar, but that's not. I just think they need to do that. Like, it's not like a wish. You just fix the calendar. Sure. That's an easy one. I'm on the opinion of the one transfer free, 2 you got to sit. I know OHSAA, living here in Ohio, I know they've clamped down on that with transfer rules in Ohio, and probably with good reason for the most part. That's one that I think I would like to see. And then, talking about the playoff, maybe I would shorten the season back to let's get this thing done by January 9th, January 8th at the latest, around there. Because as I've discovered on some of these, the last couple of years in particular, I always tell the story this way. A couple of years ago, we're down in Atlanta getting ready for Ohio State, Notre Dame, and being a kid from Ohio that went to a Catholic school, it doesn't get much more better than that, right? With those two schools. And every Notre Dame, Ohio State game in my lifetime has been super memorable. And I'm getting ready that morning to prepare for the game. And, on ESPN, and this isn't a knock on ESPN, I could have done it on any channel. They're talking about the Bills AFC Championship game. Sure. The Bills and the Ravens game from the night before. And that's where you lose if you're college football. You're not going to beat the NFL playoffs. And they've tried, and the NFL scheduled through it. I don't love it because I like both. I don't know about you. I'm not a guy that I like college football, and I like NFL football. And I always will love both for different reasons. Obviously, you can see the Packers helmet behind me. So, hopefully they'll be in a Super Bowl here soon. But we'll see.
Yeah, my bias for my love for college football a little bit more is I'm an Ohio State grad, but I'm also a Browns fan. And so my Sundays or my Saturdays are usually a little bit more fun than my Sundays. So that's my only bias there. But I love that. I think that's a great change. Would you move? Now we're playing games in week 0. I don't love the week 0 stuff. I don't know, however we want to call it, but would you move the season up a little bit, or how would you change that?
Yeah, I think week 0 should be week 1. I mean, everything's been pushed up anyway for my kids when they go to school. The calendar's already been pushed up in that way. I think you could. I think we could skip the conference championship games, but the money around those, they've got to find a way. You get going a little bit earlier. I mean, these teams are already out there. I guess it pushes up camp a little bit earlier. the coaches are control freaks. I get that, where every minute's planned out. But I was out at Ohio State camp last Saturday, and they'll be fine. They'll get those guys going, and you just got to accelerate the path a little bit more. Plus, when you're open, this is going to sound crass, but when you're opening up with Ball State, you can tweak some things in game early before you start playing some of those heavyweight games, which they do have in week 2 right. against Texas.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to get into a couple of your thoughts on the Buckeyes here in a minute, but I want to go through the Sporting News. I don't know if you put this together, if this was your article or the Sporting News in general, but you guys ranked the head coaches in FBS college football 1 to 138. So the top 5: Cignetti, Smart, Day, Freeman, Lanning. So what, in your opinion, first of all, Curt Cignetti, I know he's coming off the national championship. Why Cignetti at 1, do you think?
Well, yeah, that is mine. And I've done these. I have the spreadsheet up right now. I've been doing those since 2016. So it's fun to see how that moves. But, I mean, I can defend Cignetti pretty easily. I mean, the last 3 years.
I agree.
Between James Madison and Indiana, you're looking at a 46-6 record. You're looking at national championship at a place where it was deemed impossible by me, by others for years. It's unbelievable. And he backed that up. He backed up the bold talk. When you've only lost at Indiana 2 games, one to Ohio State, a team that won a national title, the other to Notre Dame, who played for a national title. They went through last year's schedule. I was a cynic too, right? Like going into last year, I was saying, hey, there's no way they're winning in Iowa. There's no way they're winning at Penn State or Oregon, and they go win all those games. There's no way they're beating the Buckeyes. Well, they did. Right. And then they go through the playoff the way that they did. It's wild. We did rank the 20 greatest teams of all time. We had a huge panel this for Sporting News this week, and Indiana had the highest-ranked Big Ten team at number 10, 2025 Indiana. And I think in 10 years we're going to look back at it and marvel even more. But I do think they'll compete as long as he's there. The top 3, honestly, on that list, top 3 was pretty easy. It was Cignetti, Kirby, you put ahead of Ryan because he's got one more national title. If Ohio State went out and won it this year, you'd probably flip them. So, I mean, you may even put Ryan number 1 because it would be 2 and 3 years.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about guy number 12 on your list, Kyle Whittingham, who goes from Utah, takes over at Michigan. And, I believe this was, we mentioned Doug earlier, but I believe this was Doug's co-host, Bill Landis, that asked the question that kind of was taken the wrong way. Kyle Whittingham's take on the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry, saying like, and I thought it was I'm an Ohio State guy. I thought it was a perfectly good answer. It's like, we want to win the game, but there's nothing personal. There's no animosity between me and Ryan Day. And I thought that was fine. But what's your thoughts, I guess, on his comments about the rivalry and him taking over the Michigan Wolverines program?
Well, okay. Well, we could start with Bryce Underwood saying it's just another game. That's
that
is off base. Like, you can't. There's just too much history, too many one-liners, too many press conferences from Karan Higdon to Terry Glenn that I have filed away of like guys that have said things about this game and it's backfired on them. Sure. Whittingham's sentiment's not wrong. Do you really hate Ryan Day? Of course he doesn't. Now, do the programs hate each other? Sure. Do the fan bases hate each other? Sure. It's the best rivalry in all of sports. I've been to several of those games and watched it and loved it, and it's fun to cover. And I was surprised, though, that Kyle said it that way, because this is a guy that's been around BYU, Utah. And there's hate in that rivalry for completely different reasons that are like, there's some religious, without getting into it, there's like religious undertones to that rivalry. Oh, yeah. That's well known. And so he's going to find out, because you are tied, I think, besides Bo and Woody, I'm pretty sure I can, because they coached in that darn thing so long, I could probably tell you everybody else's record. Everybody knows Tressel's record and Cooper's record and Meyer's record and Day's record. Earl Bruce I think he was like 1 game over 500. On the opposite side, Lloyd's record, Rich Rod and Brady Hoke and Harbaugh. So, yeah, you're defined on a lot of levels by how you do in that game. And Ryan Day figured that out firsthand for about 4 years. And, they obviously flipped the script last year. They should win again this year. And then it gets them closer to 500. But that's exactly what you're remembered by.
Exactly. And I think that's a perfect answer. That game's so important in so many ways. And, it's not just another game, but I felt like Harbaugh kind of made it a little bit more personal, and that took it to a new level, which Ryan Day then made it personal, which negatively affected him a little bit. All right, let's get into the Sporting News' top 25. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong in this, I'm just going to go through the top 10 real quick here. So Indiana, Ohio State, Georgia, Texas, Notre Dame, Oregon, Miami, Ole Miss, Oklahoma, USC. Does that sound right?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So I want to look at this from a Buckeye perspective, as that's primarily who I cover on this show. But the Buckeyes play at number 1, Indiana. They play at number 4, Texas. They host number 6, Oregon, and are at number 10, USC. That's a pretty brutal schedule. That doesn't even include at Iowa. That doesn't include hosting Michigan. So half your games, 6 out of the 12 games are pretty tough games, 4 of them being against top 10 opponents. Your thoughts on Ohio State's schedule as a whole and your expectations for them going into the 2026 season?
I mean, it's the hardest Ohio State schedule I've ever seen. And that's not saying it like to be outlandish or anything. I mean, Illinois and Nebraska are on there too.
Right. Yeah.
Trip to Nebraska is not, you can't just go there and play. Illinois, you can't just show up and play. I mean, that's 2/3 of their schedule. You're looking at about 6 or 7 ranked teams. Mm-hmm. You mentioned all those top 10 teams. That game at Texas, that's a brutal one down there. The last time Ohio State played there, it was a tough game. They did win. I think it was 24-7, but it was against a Colt McCoy-led Texas team that had plenty of talent. Won't be easy. The USC road trip's tricky. I really think that one's the tricky one because it's in that Oregon, Indiana point of the schedule. So what I'm getting at is I still think they'll go at least 10-2, which is not going to be easy, but I just think they will. If for some reason they were to go 9-3, and then depending on what the if was, I still think they would have a really good playoff case, like a Ohio high school team that plays in D4 but plays everybody,
sure.
In D1 and 2, and there are plenty of those that do that across the state, and I think they would be given that benefit of the doubt. Maybe it just depends on the who. You mentioned Iowa; they haven't played there in 8 years, and it did not go well the last time they played there. So that's probably an understatement. But so when you're playing all of those really good teams, they better be ready. But I actually kind of like that. There have been years where Ohio State has skated through a month of the schedule and beat teams by 40 that weren't even remotely a challenge. I think this will actually help them as opposed to last year when it was, you tell me, who did they see other than Texas during the regular season where it was like, that's an active defensive front that gave them problems before Indiana? It was probably
Texas. And the only other game that I felt like gave them any little bit of trouble was maybe at Washington for the first half. Yeah. And then they kind of took over in the second half.
That's a good shout because that was a tough game and their defense did play well in that game. So and then you go a month without playing. I mean, Michigan's pass rush wasn't what it was supposed to be. Penn State's wasn't as good as it could have been. And you catch Indiana and it's like, oh wait. And then you catch Miami, who had obviously the 2 first-round pass rushers. So again, they're going to see teams with players that are NFL players. I mean, especially that Texas game. We had a conversation in the office the other day. I was like trying to count how many first-round picks will be playing in that game, and it's a pretty big number.
Yeah, that's going to be. I mean, that's obviously the spotlight game of week 2, and less than a month away. A month ago yesterday. So a lot of great games on the schedule. Bill, I want to wrap up here in a minute, but is there any of, I mentioned the top 10. Is there maybe a sleeper team that you can see either from the Big Ten or just from a national perspective, any other conferences outside of that top 10 that you think could maybe make a deeper run? Kind of like and Indiana wasn't necessarily a sleeper last year. They made the playoff the year before, but is there a sleeper this year maybe you can see outside of that top 10?
Well, you were just talking about him. Washington and the Big Ten could be interesting with Damon
Okay.
Williams back, and they've got to learn how to do the travel piece and come across the country and play well. They've been blown out a couple times doing that. Iowa, Michigan, for example, those were bad games for them over the last couple years. Outside of the Big Ten, I've been predictions are made to make yourself look foolish, but
Right.
Louisville in the ACC is really interesting to me. Link Keenholtz, the Ohio State transfer. The running backs are great around Isaac Brown, DeJuan Brown. Clev Lubin's one of the best defensive players in the country. Now you could flip that around and say, well, I mean, you're pumping up a team that played in the Bush's Baked Bean Bowl against Toledo, a game I did watch, by the way. But yeah, I mean, there's some pieces around Jeff Brom. SMU's another interesting team in that conference that I think SMU just continues to build. I know they have money. I know they're set up that well. One of the interesting things about NIL, I keep telling people, there are 5 teams from Texas in our top 25. Texas Tech, Texas, Texas A&M, Houston, TCU's not in ranks, SMU is, but TCU, they just played in a national title game not that long ago. Baylor has DJ Lagway. That entire state is flush with NIL money and football crazy fans. And I think it's worth watching. Houston out of the Big 12 is another interesting team under Willie Fritz.
I'm taking some notes. I'm just going to look at some over-unders after this from a guy who knows his stuff. So, Bill, I do want to wrap up with this. I try to go kind of rapid fire with you on this, but like going back to our original bio here, non-football question. It says in your bio you are a lover of 80s awesomely bad movies. So I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit. Do you have, it could be a top 3, Mount Rushmore, top 5, whatever, of awesomely bad 80s movies that you love or would highly recommend?
Well, I mean, it depends on what your definition of like awesomely bad is. I mean,
I'll leave that interpretation up to the
like
viewer.
I mean, like I was literally, I go back to my college days at OU, and there was a set of movies that we watched so much on VHS that they basically wore out, and that was very interesting over the years. Like Fletch is not a bad movie. That's a classic. That falls under classic. So when you get into like awesomely bad movies, like we're talking, you could go like a deep pull, like The Wraith. I mean, that was not a good movie, but necessarily by movie standards, but it has Charlie Sheen in it. It's super weird, and I will sit and watch it. And you go back to here's one that more recent. Okay, so Masters of the Universe just came out, and I watched the one on Prime, and it's kind of like, it's okay. You know what I mean? Like, it was fun nostalgia. The original definitely qualifies with Dolph, awesomely bad. Courtney Cox.
Okay.
It's you've seen this, yes?
I mean, I remember watching, I'm only a couple years younger than you, but I remember watching the He-Man cartoons as a kid on Saturday morning, but I don't remember watching the movie.
Oh, it's bad. So I mean, if you do, it's that kind of thing. There are plenty of movies like that from the 80s, from the 90s as well. I mean, obviously, when you grew up in that age, the interesting thing is when you have kids like I do, they won't sit and watch these movies. Now, there's awesomely good movies, like you get into the like Tombstone and Point Break, those kind of movies that I can watch. The Few Good Men, those aren't awesomely bad. Those are just flat out awesome movies, and there's a reason why they're on all the time.
No doubt. So I just, as you were saying that, I was like, well, I should probably have a few I throw back. So from I wouldn't even call this a sports movie, but over the top.
There you go. Perfect.
Awful, but that's a perfect definition.
Perfect example.
Teen Wolf, the worst basketball ever, but an entertaining movie. I don't know if you're familiar with The Burbs. Have you seen The Burbs? That's a great one. And then this is more of a classic, The Goonies. That's probably the movie I watched the most as a kid growing up, 80s movie. So
unbelievable movie. Unbelievably great movie. Yeah.
So, I mean, I could sit and talk movies all day. I could sit and talk college football all day. But Bill, this has been fun. Hopefully we can do this again sometime. Appreciate you taking your time, and let people know again where they can either find your stuff or find you on social media, stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm at BillBender92 at sportingnews.com. And like we were talking about, live in Pickerington, Ohio. It's another one of those crazy, great. I mean, the high school talent around here is great. Great football town. Steady producer of NFL talent right now between Jack Sawyer, Sonny Styles, Lorenzo Styles, the Hamiltons. It's a fun place to live in because they love their football here.
No doubt. Well, Bill Bender, the Sporting News, we appreciate you taking the time, and thanks for joining us on the 330 Sports Show. Have a great night.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this show on Youngstown Studio. This is original Youngstown content. Feel free to share our videos and tell your friends about us. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook. Thank you.